Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the second video in the Applying to University series. This week I'm going to talk about my top tips for writing a personal statement, specifically geared towards applying to Oxford and Cambridge. There's one thing to remember: I come from a humanities background. I do French and Spanish at university. I considered applying for languages and history, languages and linguistics, but in reality, I focused mainly on languages. So that is something to remember. Some of these tips can be applied to all subjects, but just bear in mind that I do come from a languages background. So let's get right into it. But before we do, if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions about what I'm saying, if you are wondering about any more help you could get, please ask any questions you have in the comment section below. And subscribe if you haven't already, because there will be more videos about the university application process coming soon. And if you haven't already, I suggest you check out the video I put out a couple of weeks ago, explaining super curricular activities to do over the summer. And then a couple of months ago, where I actually read my personal statement, and it should give you an idea of the sort of things I wrote about and the sort of tone you might want to aim for. But remember that your personal statement should be your aim, so always go for what you think is best. Okay, so leading on from that, my first tip is to take inspiration from older students' personal statements, whether they were at your school before and your teachers have them in sort of an archive, whether you find them online or your parents can find some for you. I suggest you read lots of different personal statements. You get an idea of the sort of angles you can take, because it really can help just get the wheels turning. I found it really hard to know where to start with my personal statement, and reading some other people's personal statements, some of their examples, really helped me. It obviously helps if you can find personal statements that apply to the subject you want to apply for, but in reality, any can help. You do have to be very careful though. Do not copy personal statements you might find. It's plagiarism, and often the result you'll get out of it won't be as good as what you could have produced yourself. You will often get two distinct tones clashing with each other, and you don't really want that because it sounds a bit robotic and stilted. So use other people's for help, but don't copy. Okay, my second tip, and these are in no particular order because I've just realised that this maybe should have been the first tip, but make sure you write your personal statement to the course you want to apply for. So sometimes you'll be applying for 2 different courses at 2 different unis, or 1 course here, 3 courses there, etc., etc. It often helps if your choices are very similar. So for instance, I applied to do French and Spanish at all of my 5 choices, but you can get away with changing it up a bit. Specifically for Cambridge, I assume this still applies, but if you apply for something like archaeology at Cambridge and then you want to do history at other universities, just because you like the archaeology course at Cambridge, you can make your personal statement history based with a bit of archaeology, and then in your Cambridge application, they often ask you to write sort of a second mini personal statement. So just bear that in mind. You always have the chance with Cambridge to do an extra personal statement. If you have a course like History and Modern Languages or Maths and Computer Science, remember to split your personal statement sort of halfway. You can talk about, let's say you have 4 points in your personal statement. You can talk 1 about history, 1 about languages, 1 about history, 1 about languages. See if you can get some overlap as well. That's really important. So see if you can talk about the history of France. See if you can talk about the French language through the ages, sort of thing. It really does quite help to combine if you can. Okay, so tip number 3 now is to do lots of supercurricular activities. So supercurricular refers to doing activities, reading, jobs, work experience that all relate to your subject area outside of your A-level course. So extracurricular is more like doing sport outside of school, whereas supercurricular means reading around your subject interest area outside of school. So obviously you do your subject in school, but it's really important to show how passionate you are about them by doing certain things outside of school. So if you read if you go and watch the video of my personal statement I put out a couple of months ago, you'll understand the sort of things that I did. So I read a bit of poetry, I read a book on linguistics. I then looked ahead at our year 13 book and I read it over the summer rather than waiting to do it in class. And I was able to talk about that as well. So there are lots of different things you can do. And I suggest that you have a think about it sooner rather than later. The reason I'm putting this video out so soon is that it gives you time to sort of stock up on your supercurricular activities rather than waiting until the last possible minute. My video about this, starting the application process to Oxford and Cambridge, covers this in a bit more detail, so I suggest you go and watch that. So my next tip is very linked to that. You need to make yourself sound passionate about your subject area in your personal statement. You need to get across that you really, really want to study it without explicitly saying this. So don't go, I'm really passionate about French and Spanish, because lots of people will say that and you need to stand out in your personal statement. But the way I suggest you do this, the way I suggest you make yourself sound more passionate about your subject area, is to create mini storyboards about what you were doing over the summer, over year 12, to show you're passionate. So, again, I suggest you watch the video where I read my personal statement out loud, but the way I did this was to say I read about one thing, and it led me to be interested in another thing. It led me to pursue the idea, the concept that was being presented in the first thing I read, and it led me to do another thing. So I read some European poetry, and there was the French and then the Italian translation. And I felt that the Italian translation didn't quite match the French to a T. So I decided to try my own poetry translation of the same poem from French to English. And that's essentially what I wrote about. I said, okay, so I read this poem, but I realized the translation was a bit off. And I really wanted to see if I could have a go at translating it. And I did. So that's really helpful to show how engaged you are with your subject. And that is essentially what you're trying to do. You're trying to show the admissions tutors, the people reading your personal statement, that you really care about your subject and you really want to study it. Okay, so coming to the end now, this is the last tip. Try to not be too wordy in your personal statement. So remember, you only have 4,000 characters to write your personal statement, which is about 500 words. Now, it's always better to have a lot more to start with, to have lots of supercurricular activities that you can draw from, but make sure that when you're writing it, you don't make it too hard for yourself by having to cut it down later. So try and cram in as much as possible. Try and get in a lot of details, but don't go too crazy, because you need to be concise at the end of the day. So you need to create these stories with a bit of detail, but don't go on for lines and lines and lines, because you just haven't got the space. It's a really hard balance to strike, but with the help from teachers, parents, friends, you can do it. And actually, in reality, that's sort of the most important part of this personal statement process. Surround yourself with people who will help you with this, who have experience with this, and really use them to make your personal statement what it can be. I probably sent my personal statement off to the sort of Oxbridge coordinator at my school. We were really lucky to have one, about 3 times before I got my final version. So I think this is really important, and I think it really, really helps. So that is the end of this video, a really quick guide on my tips to writing a personal statement. As I said, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. I really suggest watching other videos about this because other people will have different tips. They'll word them differently. You might understand them more. Go and read articles. There are plenty of those to get help with. But essentially, get as much help as you can with this. It's not something you have to do by yourself. Obviously, you have to write it by yourself, but you can get lots and lots of help. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and please subscribe if you haven't already. Stay tuned.